This is Rich Lieberman. You want to know why KMBR, the alleged sports talk radio station in the Bay Area, is an audio pile of poop? I heard through the grapevine, folks, somebody, I guess, with more than half a brain, which is a rarity at that place, was at the radio station. And they said to somebody, hey, why don't we talk to Nick Bosa, who's one of the star defensive ends for the San Francisco 49ers, who are on KMBR? Why don't we ask Nick Bosa about what he thought if he watched, which I pretty much think, like everybody else, he watched some of the debate on Tuesday night with former President Trump and current Vice President Kamala Harris. And do you know somebody put the kibosh on it? Why? Because KMBR is a bunch of fucking mutton heads who don't know anything because they live in a fishbowl. You know, Nick Bosa, if you can look online, has stated many a times his endorsement, his pro Donald Trump situation. And that's fine. Great. So what? It would be what? Out of the blue? You can't ask Nick Bosa? And there's other players besides Nick Bosa on the 49ers, like a whole lot of wealthy, very successful athletes who like former President Trump. So you can't ask Nick Bosa, God forbid, hey, Nick, did you watch the debate? What did you think? That's all. And if you don't want to answer it, I'm sure Nick Bosa, he's a grown man. He could say, no, I don't want to talk about that. Look, there was a story just today that Pat Mahomes, the star Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, they asked him about his own politics because Trump mentioned his name. And he very, very politely said, I keep my politics to myself. I don't use this forum to talk about politics. Very gracious. There was no big deal about it. But KMBR, folks, they're a bunch of morons and schmucks and idiots and malcontents. Dare they broach the subject even? God forbid. We're going to get killed. We can't talk about the real world. We want to talk about tiddlywinks. Basically, that's the situation. You mean they have two reporters down there. They have a reporter by the name of John Dickinson. They have a play-by-play guy named Greg Papa, who also does a talk show. You couldn't go up to Nick Bosa and ask him about the debate. Hell, the entire world was watching the debate. It didn't just cross into politics, it crossed into everything. The news, beyond sports, beyond pop culture. Hell, one of the NFL's leading players who happens to date one of the most successful, one of the most famous pop stars on the universe, Taylor Swift, endorsed Kamala Harris. So, God forbid, somebody at Kansas City, Chief Central, they probably did go up to Kelsey, Mr. Kelsey, the football player who, along with Mr. Mahomes, he happens to date, very much involved with Taylor Swift. They couldn't ask Mr. Kelsey about whether or not he would consider endorsing whomever. Why not? But keep it locally. This is what is so ridiculous and so pathetic about KMBR. It's a fishbowl. And they have little Uber drivers and malcontents who should know better. We don't want to mess with our client, the 49ers. Now, they didn't say that, but they probably were thinking that. Well, guess what? Some things, KMBR, supersede sports. You're not very good at that. A common A common sight, a common occurrence has been Nick Bosa embracing former President Trump. You couldn't ask about his feelings about the debate. I'm sure he watched it. I'm sure he saw snippets of it if he didn't watch the entirety of it. So, what is the bad thing? What would be so common sense as to ask Nick Bosa, who is available, to ask about what he thought about the debate? Maybe he would go on extensively. Maybe he would talk about why he supports Trump. Maybe he would talk about his deep-seated convictions as to why he supports the former president. You could have asked them. You could have made news just by asking them. And that's not the point, just to make news. It would have been nice. It would have been something innovative, something perhaps, God forbid, even creative and newsworthy. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, understand this. KMBR are Uber drivers and malcontents and idiotic professors of sports minutia. And they can't even cover sports well, let alone something as common sense as this little nugget, because they live in a bubble. They don't know about real world and real stuff that is involved with people that goes beyond sports. I know maybe some of you are saying, I don't want to hear about that. I want to stick to sports. Guess what? You're in the minority. Most people would have loved to hear, perhaps in the future even, about Nick Bosa's endorsement and adulation of the former president, Donald Trump. I know I would. And I'll tell you what, years and years ago when I covered news and sports, I certainly would have asked him about such a situation. Maybe they would have gone on my case, they being the PR people for the 49ers. But you know what? That's a fair question. If Mr. Bosa says, I don't want to talk about that, well, great. Fine. We're not going to push him down. Shit, he might as well push us down. That would be frightening. Why doesn't KMBR ask? It's basic common sense. But that would require a full brain, something that KMBR innards have no association of.